I'd like to start by expressing my anumodana, my rejoicing with what has been accomplished here and with this very beautiful monastery you've got. It's really uplifting when you come out and you come maybe from the big city, Georgetown, or even from KL or something, and then you drive into the little roads, the roads becoming smaller and smaller, and you notice that you're moving to what is called a forest monastery. That's the whole idea of forest monastery, to be away from the action, to be away from government and all the big political, social, cultural, entertainment events, and to be in nature, to be quiet and peaceful. And I think you can all experience that already when you're driving out. And I imagine if you're in Georgetown, is it Georgetown? Yeah, you're in Georgetown. No, but the big city on Penang is called Georgetown, eh?
Yes,
The capital. You may have some temple which is closer and more convenient, maybe even almost in walking distance. But I don't think you're wasting your time by coming out here, because now your mind already starts calming down and you start leaving behind all the worldly concerns during the drive. And once you're here and you're higher up, you're here and you're higher up and you can enjoy the beautiful view. I think we can just leave it. It's okay, no? I think everyone can hear me or any. And then you've got this beautiful view, you're surrounded by forests, and it's so much easier to develop mindfulness, it's so much easier to have a clear and peaceful and calm mind. But nevertheless, I fully acknowledge to come out here and assist the monks for driving them to Pindapata, to the alms round. I think we left at 7 or something, or even before 7. And there's a whole roster of kapiyas, so my anumodana to those kapiyas, because they have to get up very early to do that. And even those who came after alms round to offer food and now for the Dhamma sharing, again my anumodana, because not everyone likes to get up so early and to take the time to come out to a forest monastery. So my mudita that you can enjoy this beautiful place, and now the task is up to you to make good use of it. Because even the most beautiful monastery, the best facilities, the most peaceful environment will not really help if no one is making use of it. I like to express my anumodana, my rejoicing to the resident Jawbat, the abbot who received me with great friendliness. And I'm quite impressed. We have never met before. I ordained in Sri Lanka, he ordained in Thailand. I'm originally German, he is Malaysian Chinese. I live in the Ajahn Chah tradition, which is part of Mahanikai. He ordained in the Dhammayut tradition. So you would think we don't have too much in common, but we got on really well, and we had a very interesting exchange about our experience with different Kuba Ajahns, about his practice of sitting, dukkha, vedana, meditation, about which I would have been very afraid. Quite admirable how diligently your resident monk has been practicing. And it's fantastic that in the Sangha, in the Bhikkhu Sangha, even two monks from such different backgrounds meeting the first time can share the Dhamma and can live together very easily, because the principles of Dhamma and the rules of discipline the Lord Buddha has given us ensure that level of harmony. You come to a new monastery, I've never been here, we never met, and things are flowing. So my anumodana for the Patisantara, the hospitality, the friendly reception, to my team of 2 drivers who got me here yesterday, to Stephanie, who organized it all and received me and said hello at Ajahn Mahayanu's place. Much appreciated. In terms of Dhamma sharing, the teaching of the Buddha is totally revolutionary. In fact, it was almost shocking for his contemporaries, because he completely went beyond an established principle which was widely believed by spiritual practitioners in ancient India. It's something in modern words you can maybe say, no pain, no gain. Do you know that from the gym? Some people going to the gym, they usually say no pain, no gain. If you want to have that top body, like a model or like Arnie Schwarzenegger, you can't get that by relaxing. You have to really work hard in the gym, and so hard that it's really painful. That's what they say. And spiritual practitioners in ancient India believed the same thing. And they thought, if you want to have complete enlightenment, total freedom from suffering, the highest state that the human mind can possibly achieve and realize, then obviously you have to undergo really lots of pain. You have to really suffer in your efforts to get there. And even the Bodhisattva believed that in the beginning. You may have heard of the ascetic practices he did for some 5-6 years before his supreme awakening. Have you ever seen pictures or the statues? The Buddha himself gave the description that he was so emaciated, and he looked one of these famine victims, which you can sometimes see in Africa. This is how he looked like. And he said when he would touch the front of his belly, he would also touch his backbone, because there was nothing in between anymore, between the skin on his tummy and the spine and the back. And even the devas, when they saw him, they were no longer sure whether he actually had the beautiful complexion of a Mahapurusa, or whether he would rather look black or brown or yellow. So much had his natural beauty and beautiful complexion deteriorated. And he said he rubbed his limbs because he felt so weak and tired from the fasting, and the hairs would just fall out, rotten at their roots, because he didn't have enough nutriment. And then finally, when he squatted down to relieve himself, he was so weak that he actually collapsed and he toppled over. So he was on hair's breadth of dying. He pushed it so far, the principle of no pain, no gain, and he increased the level to the worst possible pain and deprivation you can experience without dying. And then very fortunately, when he collapsed there, a memory came to him, which gave him the crucial revolutionary insight. Do you know what memory arose in his mind? At that crucial moment, he had tried everything. He had studied with the 2 most advanced spiritual teachers who had very deep samadhi state. And when he realized that is still not full awakening, that is not nibbana, that is not complete freedom from the wound of samsara, then he set out and he did the ascetic practices. And now he was almost dead and he collapsed. And then a memory arose in his mind. Does no one know that? I'm glad we are talking about that. That's such a crucial event in the Buddha's life. Every Buddhist should know that. What did he remember? It was an event that happened when he was a small boy and he was still a child. It's an event that happened under a rose apple tree, a jumbo tree. I guess you're in Penang, you can buy a rose apple probably, no? Do you eat rose apple sometimes? In Pali that is called jambu, and India used to be called Jambu Deepa, the rose apple continent named after that fruit. What happened under the jambu tree when the Buddha was a little boy, a child? His father was doing the great ceremony of the first ploughing. It's a spring festival, and even the king would personally plough the first field there, and it was a huge event. The whole population is out, and the Buddha had a nurse supposed to look after him, but the nurse also got excited and wanted to see the king doing the ploughing personally, so she just left the little boy under the jambu tree. And at that time, when the Buddha was observing the hard work of the oxen and the birds eating all the little insects, and he contemplated the suffering in the world, and then his mind attained samadhi. The little boy spontaneously attained the first jhana, sitting under the jambu tree. And when they came back hours later, when the ceremony was over, they were very amazed, and even his father was so amazed that he paid respects to his own son, which is very unusual in ancient India, and particularly for the king, because the Bodhisattva, being a little boy, and was sitting in deep samadhi, cross-legged, full lotus, like an advanced meditator. And they say that the shadow of the tree had not moved, which of course also has a symbolical meaning, because those days they didn't have smartphones, clocks, watches. They measured the time with a kind of sundial. So that was a metaphorical meaning also, that when you're in samadhi, the time is standing still. It's a kind of timeless experience, and only once the mind comes out of that, the normal perception of time will restart again. And the first jhana, as you know, is accompanied by rapture and bliss, and by the unification of mind. Very important, rapture and bliss. And this is what the Bodhisattva remembered when he was close to death. And when he remembered that experience where he was so happy, and at the same time very clear-minded, it's not a happiness that is sensual. It's not like the happiness from dancing, drinking, eating nice, listening to nice music, but it's a happiness, joy, rapture and bliss that is born from seclusion and letting go. And because of that, he asked himself, is that maybe the way to enlightenment, rather than the self-torture? And then the insight occurred to him, this is maybe the way to true awakening. And this was a crucial breakthrough. Can one maybe get through Nibbana, to total freedom from dukkha, to the end of the circle of rebirth, not by pain, but by happiness? And the intuition told him, yes, that is true. And this is why he started eating again. Because if you're so weak, it's actually very difficult to develop samadhi, particularly if you don't have samadhi already. It's hardly possible. So he realized that he can get back to this very wholesome, blissful mind state of samadhi. He first has to get his body in better shape. Not indulging, but just giving the body enough nutriment that he is reasonably fit. And this is why he then accepted the food and accepted the milk rice from Lady Sujata and so on. And it turned out, when he did that, and he developed the jhanas, even under the Bodhi tree, that this was a way to enlightenment. It's not yet enlightenment, awakening itself, but it's a crucial ingredient on the path that insight, vipassana, based on wisdom, the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the understanding of dependent origination, the understanding of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and not self, that can occur based on the samadhi. And after he had been successful with that, he started teaching it. And that was completely revolutionary. Sukhena sukham atiganta bang. We can attain happiness by means of happiness. And even nowadays, this sounds almost too good to be true. You don't have to torture yourself, you don't have to go through big pain. You can use happiness on the path to even greater happiness until you have what is called the highest happiness, the happiness of Nibbana, which is a happiness which is beyond feelings. So difficult to imagine, but it's still happiness. And I'm glad, as people were not aware of that story, that we are talking about that. So don't believe that you have to torture the body. You can make progress by means of happiness. There has to be the right kind of happiness. This is where satipatthana comes in. Foundations of mindfulness. Have you ever heard of satipatthana, foundations of mindfulness? Okay, I think everyone has heard of that. Now, this is a very important one. And do you know any of the exercises the Buddha explains? It's a long sutta, and there are many, many exercises among the foundations of mindfulness. But does anyone know the four main ones? The four main areas? What are the four foundations of mindfulness? Number one, body, kaya, contemplating the body. Number two, feeling, vedana, contemplating feeling. Number three, that's number four, almost. Number three is cittanupassana, contemplating the mind or the mind states, the emotions, the moods affecting the mind. Number four, Dhamma, categorization of all of experience according to terms of Dhamma. And many of the exercises are well known. The first one the Buddha gives for contemplating the body is the breath. Anapanasati, being mindful of the breath, because the breath is a bodily phenomenon. But often people are not so fully aware what is the exercise regarding Vedana. If you want to do a Satipatthana, foundation of mindfulness regarding Vedana, what is the distinctions you have to be able to make? There are three kinds of feelings. Pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Dukkha Vedana, Sukha Vedana, Adukkha Sukha Vedana. And this is what we experience all the time. Whenever you're conscious, you will always have Vedana. When you see something, when you hear something, when you touch something, when you eat something, and so on, there will always be Vedana. It will always feel either pleasant, and that can be super pleasant, you'll be out of your mind, it's so nice. Or it can be a little bit pleasant. It can be unpleasant, or if it's in a bad migraine or something like that, it can be outright intensely painful. But all the painful ones you can summarize, whatever intensity, it's still painful feeling, unpleasant, and the positive ones. And occasionally you can have been just in between. You can't really say it doesn't feel either really pleasant nor does it feel unpleasant, it's completely neutral. It is much rarer and it's also not so easy to notice. That's the first distinction. And most people know that one. But in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha gives another distinction. How to analyze Vedana. It's a twofold distinction, so that 3 become 6. Does anyone know that one? Because that is another one which many people don't know. Even when they love doing Satipatthana and have studied that, often they don't know. What is the further twofold distinction for all these Vedanas? The Buddha calls it Samisa and Niramisa. Samisa is worldly, fleshly, sensual. Niramisa is non-worldly, spiritual. And all of these 3 feelings you can have either as a worldly, sensual feeling, or you can have it as the spiritual, non-worldly feeling. And that distinction is so important, because the worldly one, particularly the pleasant one, that is the one we have to abandon. You can't get to Nibbana by enjoying worldly, sensual happiness. Else the guys who are doing the most partying would be the ones attaining first, but that is not the case. And the Buddha says, Sukhena Sukham Atigantabam, attaining happiness by happiness, he refers to Niramisa Sukha, he refers to otherworldly, non-sensual, non-fleshly happiness. And that is the one we have to develop. So that distinction is crucial, because one you have to chuck out, and it's dangerous, and you have to keep away from it, or at least indulge in it only, not to indulge in it when you experience it, and to have mindfulness, not get carried away by it, and reduce it and restrain it. And only the non-worldly happiness, that's the one we really want to develop. You can't have too much of that. So, what would be an example? The Buddha gave the example, the best kind of Niram is a happiness, and that is a happiness from Samadhi, from jhana. The piti sukha, the rapture and bliss from the mind, the unified and Samadhi. Experience the jhanas, and later in fourth jhana even the complete upekkha, the complete equanimity, which is also a form of happiness, although it doesn't feel pleasant, but the upekkha, the equanimity based on Samadhi, and it comes under that as well. But many people don't find that easy to experience that rapture and bliss. Or is that the first thing you get when you sit down and you try to meditate? Do you immediately get easily rapture and bliss? Not so easy, no? So are there any other forms of Niramisa Sukha? Are there any other forms of non-worldly, non-sensual happiness that we can develop and enjoy as part of our practice, as part of the path? Are there other happinesses which we can use to get us closer to Nibbana, which are actually good and helpful and beneficial? For example, what you did today, generosity, dharma. And you can practice that when you do your generosity, because we should never rest content only with dharma, only with generosity. Of course, when you practice dharma, if you're a generous person, you will always get a huge karmic reward, particularly if you're supporting the Sangha and you have very wholesome intentions. So the karmic reward is very, very great. It may even be incalculable, infinite. But still the Buddha would encourage people to go further than that. You want more than just a happy rebirth where you're rich and wealthy and good looking and long-lived and well-known and famous and appreciated and so on. That is all good, but it's all still impermanent. Buddha always encourages us to practice bhavana, to develop our mind, to develop the samadhi and wisdom and insight, that we ultimately can free ourselves completely. And you can practice the wisdom and satipatthana, foundations of mindfulness, while you're practicing generosity. Because now all of you, I believe, will have experienced these two different kinds of feelings. The worldly happiness and the spiritual happiness. The worldly happiness, we had very nice food today, isn't it? All these yummy Penang specialties. And the durian, although they are out of season here, I must have got it from another state. Do you like durian? Do you enjoy durian? Yeah? So when you eat durian, what kind of feeling do you have? Unpleasant or pleasant? Pleasant. Yeah. So please, satipatthana, and be mindful when you do that. You like that, and you may like the curries or whatever you eat there. And when you eat, you have a pleasant feeling. Be mindful of that, note that. But then also understand what kind of pleasant feeling is that. Eating durian, eating little sweets, is that spiritual happiness? Enjoying good food? No. That is a worldly happiness. That is a sensual happiness. The happiness we get from the senses of this body. So is that the happiness which will carry you to Nibbana? If you eat durian every day, will that help you to attain Nibbana? No, that happiness doesn't lead anywhere in terms of spiritual progress. You enjoy that as long as it lasts, and then it's all over. The next day there's no durian, and then you feel disappointed. And that's the nature of worldly happiness. It gives you a kick while it lasts, and then it's all over. And then you're already hankering after the next one. Oh, we have to buy some durian. I want to durian tomorrow as well. That's worldly happiness. Did you also notice the spiritual happiness you experienced today? What was that? Offering the food. And now the monks eat durian. No problem today, there's only 3 months and there was so much durian that everyone got it. But compare that, get a feeling for it, like a connoisseur. If you eat durian a lot, you maybe recognize what is a really good durian and what is not such a nice one. There's a foreigner who are not eating durian so often, they may not notice a distinction here. But if you are a connoisseur, you will recognize which one is exactly the right maturity and really soft and really high quality. So become a connoisseur of these feelings, in particular of the non-worldly, the spiritual one, that you recognize that. And notice that when you do the offering, that kind of happiness, that is a spiritual one. And that one helps you to develop your mind towards Nibbana. That one doesn't give you a hangover. That one is more lasting. Because even once it's over, it's still lingering on a little bit longer, and you can always get it back by just remembering. Usually you wouldn't be so happy just remembering eating durian, you really want to do it. But with the happiness of generosity, you can just remember your acts of generosity. It's called Chaganusati. It's one of the main meditation objects the Buddha has given, especially to the laity. And each time you remember that, that happiness will come up straight away again. So you can give yourself a boost. If you want to feel a bit more happy, you can give yourself a boost at any time by tuning in and remembering and rejoicing in your good actions. So one way of developing Niramisa Sukha, non-worldly Dhamma happiness, is by the act of generosity. And not only your own generosity, because imagine if you had been the only person coming here, offering all the food for the monks. So you make, in a sense, special merit, because without you the monks wouldn't have any food, and so you're completely on your own. What is your guess? What is more fun? What is more enjoyable? Having all your Dhamma friends around and offering together, or just being only one person? It's more fun than the whole group. Yeah, exactly. And why? Because you can rejoice in the good action of others. That's called anumodana. That's called mudita, sympathetic joy. Now that is tuning in into what others are doing, the goodness of other people. And rejoicing in the goodness of other people is also a form of spiritual happiness. So if you really look closely into your mind, you experience both. The happiness from doing something good yourself, and on top of that, the happiness of witnessing and rejoicing in all the goodness that all your Dhamma friends, your Kalyana Mitta, are doing. And then it's no stronger, more powerful. So we already had a very important spiritual happiness, namely from generosity and from rejoicing in other people's goodness. Could you notice any other wholesome Dhamma happinesses you may have experienced today? What else did you do here other than generosity? Pardon? Listening to Dhamma, yes. So I hope it's not too boring what I'm doing here, and I hope that you have some joy there. And if you have a more charismatic and much better and entertaining speaker than Ajahn Dhammasiha, then you may experience a great joy during the Dhamma talk. Listening to Dhamma, or reading Dhamma is also working, or YouTubing Dhamma. Now that is a form of spiritual happiness. Exactly right. And the happiness you experience while you listen to Dhamma, the happiness you experience while you are discussing Dhamma, the happiness you experience when you're recollecting Dhamma, and thinking later about it, what did he mean with this, and maybe discussing with your friends, taking notes or checking what this Ajahn said, is that actually in line with what the Buddha said, and then you check in the scriptures what really happened under the Jambu tree, whether I told you the truth there, or what happened when the Bodhisattva collapsed and almost died, and you can check that out. And you read maybe more details. And this is all the happiness of listening to Dhamma while you're doing that. Any other happiness you maybe had here today? What do you usually do when you come in? Pay respects, ne? Exactly. So that is an act of saddha, of devotion. It is an act of expressing respect and deference to the being in the whole universe most worthy of respect and deference, the supreme being in the whole universe. There's no other being that is higher than the Buddha in terms of insight, wisdom, knowledge, samadhi, compassion, virtue, all good qualities. The Buddhas have them to the highest extent. The only other ones were similar, on the same level as other Buddhas at other times. So the most worthy being in the whole universe of respect and deference and devotion and faith, and you express that. And my hope is that you have enough mindfulness, sati, that you notice what happens in your mind when you pay respects. What does it feel like? And amazingly, it can actually feel really good. And sometimes people may think, oh, this is more like a burden and I have to bow and so on. But if you do that with an expression of faith and devotion, and with some understanding of why you do that, with some understanding that even at least a little bit of the outstanding qualities of the Buddha, then you have great joy when you do that. One other Western monk is a senior monk now, a senior monk in a monastery. He told me when he went first to Thailand, and coming from a non-Buddhist environment and he didn't have an exposure to Buddhism and monks. When he was first in a monastery and first time he actually bowed to a Buddha, he was so happy that he started crying. First time he did that, because he really felt it. So that is a form of happiness we can deliberately cultivate by doing puja. It's not just the bowing, but the whole chanting and the puja. The reciting the Dhamma and doing puja, morning chanting, evening chanting. It can give you lots of wholesome happiness. Is there any other things the Buddha would recommend to make you more happy? So you see, this is a special quality of the Buddha. He's looking after, giving you all kinds of happiness you can develop. And even if you restrain yourself and you renounce certain kinds of happiness, some people find it quite enjoyable to maybe go fishing. Some people may find it enjoyable to break the third precept. Many people find it enjoyable to break the fifth precept, drinking. And so you are renouncing that. But instead, what happiness do you develop? The happiness of keeping precepts. The Buddha calls it the anavajra sukha, the blameless happiness. Because once you're keeping these 5 precepts, you will notice that you get this feeling of ease. You don't have to blame yourself for anything. That's why the Buddha also calls it avipattisara, freedom from remorse, freedom from regret, freedom from the bad conscience. And that is a very happy state. Often the spiritual happiness is a little bit more subtle. You may not notice it as much as, say, dancing on a party. The worldly sensual happiness is very coarse, and you can't really miss it. The spiritual happiness the Buddha encourages us to develop is more subtle and often more in the background. And you have to tune in a little bit to notice it. And it may also take a while to build up. There's someone who is killing, stealing, adulterating, lying and intoxicating themselves, and if they stop doing that, they will not feel happy on day one. In fact, it may feel a little bit painful to do that in the beginning, if someone is not yet used to that. But over time, and once we start keeping precepts for a longer time, we are settling in, then you will notice that happiness of non-remorse, that happiness of blamelessness, and building up in the background of your mind, and gradually becoming stronger, and that is a happiness which is basically there all the time. Sensual happiness usually works only while you're indulging it. The happiness of being a virtuous person, and you keep these precepts, that is all the time there in the background. And again, the Buddha recommends to tune in from time to time. That is called sila nusati, recollection of your own virtue. And is again one of the 6 main meditation objects that the Buddha gave particular to laity. So great opportunity. Many people, when they feel a little bit down and they need a little kick, they eat something, get a little bit of happiness. That's a typical way people feel, that gives themselves a bit of happiness. Once you understand the Buddha's teaching, you don't need that anymore. You want a little bit of kick of happiness, do something good to other beings. You want a little kick of happiness, and reflect on the generosity and the goodness of your Dhamma friends. You want a little kick of happiness, and reflect on your virtue, provided that you're keeping the 5 precepts. If we reflect on our virtue and our virtue doesn't look so good, then of course it will not work, it will not give us happiness, but feelings of regret and remorse. But if our precepts are pure, at any moment you can tune in and you will notice that happiness in the background of your mind. It feels really good. But how does this happiness help you now to realize Nibbana? I mean, happiness is good in it by itself, and it's nice if we can feel happy, and if it's a wholesome happiness, it doesn't have any negative side effects, it's not harming anyone, it's good for everyone, it doesn't give us a hangover, it's already a good happiness, but how do you use that? Why does it help you to attain full enlightenment? Because happiness is a crucial ingredient for samadhi. And one reason that you find it difficult when you sit is that there's no happiness, no rapture and bliss. It's very hard not to focus the mind only by force. But if you already feel very happy from being very generous, from rejoicing in other people's generosity, from doing puja and bowing to the Buddha, to the Sangha, expressing your devotion and respect, and from keeping precepts, your mind is already bright and happy when you start meditating. And that happiness is a crucial ingredient to develop into rapture and bliss. And the rapture gives you bodily tranquility. Once your body is completely tranquil, your mind is blissed out. And the mind that is blissed out will easily unify, attain samadhi. And the mind that is imbued with samadhi can see things as they truly are. The mind that is based on samadhi and samatha, they can see the 3 characteristics clearly. Has got sharp mindfulness. Now the wisdom can go really deep. You can see anicca, impermanent, not sure, whether it's the body, whether it's your feelings, whether it's your material possessions, and it all doesn't last, it's all not sure. Whether you have got a painful feeling or a happy feeling, whether you have got a joyful emotion or you're a little bit down, you can see that it's all ultimately unsatisfactory because it's always changing. Whether it's your body, other bodies, whether it is perception, thoughts internally, it's all not you, it's all not the self. You recognize there's no point in holding on to that as me and mine. And based on samadhi, that insight can go really deep. It can become strong enough, it is clear enough to the mind. And investigating the Four Noble Truths. Suffering and craving as the origin of suffering. And clearly see that craving that leads us into suffering. Based on samadhi, that insight will be very clear. You see it. When the insight is clear, and it can cut away the defilements, it can overcome the sangyojana, it can eliminate clinging and craving. You can eliminate the kilesas, and then you experience total freedom, nibbana. And it is the extinction of the asavas, the extinctions of the defilements, the end of craving, the uprooting of desire. Based on that insight, that is the experience of nibbana, that total freedom. So this is now you deliberately use that happiness, the good happiness, the non-sensual, the spiritual one, to make your mind so happy that you can easily attain samadhi. And then you use the samadhi that you can really see things as they truly are. What are they truly? Not true, impermanent, not me, not mine. And the mind seeing that whether physical objects, emotions, feelings, money, external things, everything is not me, not mine, is unsure, uncertain, is not as safe, it's ultimately disappointing, that mind will let go. When the mind fully lets go, and that is nibbana, then you're free. And you have the highest happiness. So to sum it up once more, even nowadays many people believe no pain, no gain. But the Buddha gave us a revolutionary teaching. He recognized himself that it is possible to actually use happiness for spiritual progress. But you have to know which happiness, not the sensual one, not the nice durians. They're nice, but they don't get you to Nibbana. But it's the happiness from generosity, the happiness from mudita with your Dhamma friends, the happiness from paying respect and devotion to the Buddha, the happiness from keeping precepts. That is a good one, the spiritual happiness. That one you develop till your mind is so happy and blessed out that you can easily attain samadhi. Once you attain samadhi, the mind is very calm, bright, radiant, mindful, sharp, equanimous. Then you investigate with wisdom. Reality as it truly is, impermanent, unsure, unsatisfactory, not me, not mine, not safe. And when the mind sees that very clearly, it will just let go. And once the mind lets go of everything, it experiences Nibbana and you are free. And you're out of the circle of samsara and you've got the highest happiness. So thank you for your patience. There's still a few minutes. My manager, we're leaving, what was it? You still have time. Good. You look after me. You just tell me what time to get where and I follow your instruction. And I'm sure I will be fine. So any questions, any comments? Please refute me if I said anything not in line with the Dhamma. Were you just shy, or did you really not know the story of the little bodhisattva sitting under the jambu tree? People were just trying to answer that. No? But many people really didn't know the difference between the feelings, no? The worldly and the non-worldly. That was new for many. No? Felt like that. A very important one. Oh, not a single question. Any other comment? Yeah.
Ajahn, when you are talking about happiness, excuse me, when you are talking about happiness to attain samadhi, like generosity, paying respect to the sometimes you progress and sometimes you progress because it's like a routine already. So is there any motivation? Can Ajahn please give some advice? The motivation for lay people, we really need it. If
Very
our
good.
samadhi is also the same thing. Sometimes up, sometimes down.
It's a very good question, as someone points out, and sometimes we progress, but sometimes we also regress. And most people have experienced meditation goes up and down, and sometimes practice is not so great. And a question on how can we motivate ourselves, particularly if it's not going so great. Now this is why I talked about the happiness, because happiness is usually the strongest motivation. Eh? You all want to be happy. And if you're really into durian, and you can't find any, you probably drive around for hours till you find some market where you can get it, because it gives you so much happiness eating it. And so harness that natural tendency of the mind. Every human being, it doesn't matter whether we are Malaysian Chinese or German or Thai or whatever, it doesn't even matter whether we're human or animals, have that same thing. It's natural for the mind that the mind wants happiness. And this teaching of the Buddha is very skillful and very smart, because it harnesses a natural tendency in the mind of every living being that's searching for happiness. It only has to be directed correctly. This is why we have to develop that mindfulness to distinguish these two feelings. Theoretically it's easy, but in practice it's not so easy. You really have to develop your mindfulness and your sharpness to distinguish these two ones, and you have to maintain your mindfulness, that you don't get carried away by the central one. That one is usually easier to get. And once you indulge, the mindfulness goes out of the window and you just indulge and ride on that feeling. But you need that mindfulness to recognize this is the bad kind of happiness, and then to restrain yourself. And you need the mindfulness to recognize, this is a good one. And it's a little bit subtle, much more subtle than the central one, so you have to look, you have to have sharp mindfulness to notice it. And once you focus on it, and then it will become usually stronger. And it builds up more gradually. It's a little bit like the difference like between, say, if you're doing coffee, or you're drinking green tea. The coffee kicks in immediately. The green tea is a little bit more subtle and takes a little bit longer. So the happiness from generosity, from virtue, from rejoicing, from faith and devotion, it builds up in the background more subtle, and you need to be sharp to look at it. But once you can recognize it, and once you notice when I do these actions of generosity and devotion and so on, I immediately feel better. Each time you notice that, your mind will be conditioned to go after it. So you can deliberately bait your mind with the good kind of happiness. Just like you bait a doggy, and when you hold out some food, the cat or the dog will come. You don't have to force them, you don't have to whip the dog to come. If you give him some nice food, he will come running. The same with your mind. And once it understands there's so much happiness, your mind will just naturally go for it. And you will be like one of the guys on the Kapia roster, where they like to do it. Do you get paid by the Ajahn for doing the Kapia? Do you get paid? How many dollars do you get per hour? Yeah, no, you don't get paid. So why do you do it?
Feel good.
Yeah, because it's the happiness of generosity. Yeah. The happiness of doing a service to the Sangha. It's the happiness of witnessing then all the generosity on the alms land. And so just becoming aware of that, and then tuning in, and then deliberately using that as a motivation. Use the happiness as motivation. I think that's the strongest. Also known as the positive reinforcement. It's also a method of training dogs, for example. it's amazing how you can train them with little rewards, a little bit of food, or a little bit fetching for a short time. They love doing that. And you don't have to whip them or anything. They can be very, very trained just by motivating them with happiness. Okay, and I don't want to hold you back unnecessarily. If there's no other question, we'll still be here. We can maybe close the session with the Ajahn, and if anyone wants to ask something more personal, I'll be here. And those who may have to go to work or to the bathroom get a chance to do so. So let's do the Ajahn